Welcome back to the complete beginner's guide to Cities Skylines 2. In Part 1, we tried to solve a budget crisis while growing a city through function, data, and design. In Part 2, we faced new game challenges, such as dealing with polluted citizens and cargo stuck in traffic. We've worked to educate our residents, reduce the number of trucks on the streets, and implement public transportation. Now, in Part 3, it's time for more advanced gameplay. How can we build a downtown without creating new traffic problems? We'll strategically add a transport hub and new forms of public transportation. We will test our planning abilities to survive a population boom. The question is, will we succeed? Whether you're new to the game or looking for inspiration, click the like button and let me know in the comments what would be helpful for you. My name is College Builder, your friendly college dean. And this is Part 3 of my CS2 Beginner's Guide, otherwise known as Intro 103. It's time to start class in our Pacific Northwest city of Porter. As a reminder, we are playing an almost entirely vanilla game. We've used a few visual enhancing mods to make it easy for you to follow each step. These mods don't change the mechanics of Cities Skylines 2 or the gameplay, so if you prefer strictly vanilla, you can still play along. Now, let's get started. We have 3 challenges today: how to transition from the city outwards to the country, how to connect the parts of our city with infrastructure, and how to build a dense downtown with towering skyscrapers. For now, let's figure out how to create the Exurbs as the transition between city and country. Ex means from or away from in Latin, so you can think about the Exurbs as areas away from the city. Our current problem is that our farms feel tacked on to the edge of our suburbs. The farms just sit next to the city, but it doesn't feel organic. What we need is an appropriate transition. Creating Exurbs will help solve this problem. We're going to add some homes and use our familiar city grid, 200 by 96 meters. In the development of our region, this Exurb followed Porter's development pattern where possible, making it feel connected to the greater region. But unlike the main city, these streets and homes fit in and around farms. We have been considering the environmental context while developing Porter, using the natural landscape as a guide. Here, we are also incorporating the rural setting by designing our grid and homes around existing farms, treating the farms as if they were there first, just like the natural features. So, the primary defining characteristic of the Exurbs is their semi-rural quality, which is often marked by farms. Low-density homes, which are usually spread out more than in the suburbs, are characteristic number 2. We have kept the lots fairly close together here, but it would have made sense to leave more space between them. Citizens frequently move to the Exurbs for space and privacy. Open spaces are characteristic number 3, and we will try to capture that by departing from our city grid, creating walking paths and setting homes away from the main collectors. The Exurbs are also appealing because they offer access to natural landscapes, characteristic number 4. We will try to maintain that natural element by planting trees and bushes between homes and along our paths and farms. I love squeezing houses in between the farms, taking us out of our normal grid, but having it still feel organic. Characteristic number 5 for Exurbs is the small town feel they can have. Despite being economically linked to the larger metropolitan area, this is likely a town where everyone knows each other, and owning the big house probably gives you extra influence. As a smaller town, it also means it has fewer amenities, which is characteristic 6. Characteristic 7 of the Exurbs is that residents tend to be car dependent. Because these areas are semi-rural, you are unlikely to find well-connected public transit systems, at least in the Pacific Northwest, where we are building. Although they lack public transit, they need good connections to the road and highway system, as residents often have long commutes, which is characteristic number 8. By considering all these factors, we can easily create a transition zone between the suburbs and the countryside. In terms of game mechanics, it helps to blend zones rather than keeping them homogeneous. While transition spaces are not necessary for a functioning city in the game, they are part of city design, creating cities that are aesthetically pleasing and realistic. This is the balance we are striking, building a city that works, solving problems through the data, and designing for a regional context. We've reached milestone 14, Grand City, and increased our population to over 75,000 citizens. With all these people moving in, it's time we made a significant investment in our infrastructure. Currently, traffic is a major problem for our growing city. Our road connections in and out are simple 2-lane national highways, which are prone to significant delays when there are accidents. Our rail options are non-functional. This incredible map by Poplar Ponderosa came with a rail connection, but we severed it in the first episode and have not returned to it since. It's time to correct this problem. Rail is a vital source of transport, both for cargo and for people, particularly over long distances. Once we build our downtown, a central rail station will be essential for bringing in new citizens without clogging the roads. The task right now is to cross the river and create a rail line along the bank and away from our busy streets. For our historic context, rail first reached Porter in the late 1800s. As was often the case for this period, the rail lines followed the edge of the river when possible, as it offered a relatively level, natural route without steep inclines. For our purposes, we will assume this rail line by the river has been here since that time, long before Porter expanded into a metro area. Let's find a way to reconnect this river segment with the longer rail section that links to the outside world. The challenge is that we also need a better highway route for our vehicles. Even though the rail would have come first, we will plan them both together. We have long needed a better connection to our highway. This roundabout is regularly a source of traffic backups. However, it remains an important entry point for a city, so it makes sense to build an interchange here. With the railway running underneath, it is tricky to bring the 3 sets of highways together and make all of our connections. With enough finagling and a few redos, we will eventually make ramps that feel plausible, at least for now. Completing the interchange gives us a good sense of where our rail line will and will not go. Let's pick up from where we left off, using environmental context and what looks like an old, somewhat level creek bed as our guide. At long last, our 2 pieces of rail are connected. And this is just in time, because the arterial in our industrial seaport area is at a breaking point. All of this industry feeds into one giant cul-de-sac, with only one way in and out. By expanding our highway, we have the opportunity to create another connection. Whenever we are struggling with traffic in an area, particularly with industrial trucks, we should always check how many routes are available. Remember, both manufactured goods and raw materials will travel by truck in and out of our city. As the city grows, it is helpful to expand the routes by which these materials flow, or else we risk creating the types of bottleneck we have here in Porter. Trucks are already using the interchange even before it is finished. The problem with this location is that we are right up against our rail line. We'll dig a trench under the avenue so that trains and trucks won't cross each other on this important road. Rail and highway construction this complicated was definitely not original to Porter in the late 1800s. When the interstate system took off in the late 1950s, a significant redevelopment occurred in this area due to the need to circumvent the steep hills and the desire to connect to the growing seaport. Some of the rail lines were moved and upgraded. The investment in infrastructure in the region was costly but worth it. In terms of game mechanics, this is just what we need to improve the clogged traffic on our streets. The new, wider freeway is much more efficient than the smaller national highway. The new intersection and arterial provide two good methods for accessing the seaport. Our advanced infrastructure projects are just beginning, and something bigger is still ahead. Ever since we placed the very first street in Episode 1, we've been planning to build a dense downtown on this peninsula. This will be our most ambitious project, one requiring a new cargo port. It is the city of Porter, after all. Placing a cargo harbor on this side of the city will also help with truck traffic, delivering manufactured goods right into downtown. We'll also place our rail depot over here, conveniently located for our central train station and to connect to the harbor. Now, let's build a guide road aligned with the water's edge. This will help us orient the first section of our downtown grid. It will also help us place our central train station, the modern-looking station from the Netherlands Region Pack. You may recall that our city values technology and hopes to be a city of the future. From this hub, we will build our downtown grid, starting with a smaller size than the rest of the city, 160 by 64 meters. Every 3 blocks, we will build an avenue to help create some road hierarchy. Let's also unlock large roads from the development tree, allowing us to build a 6-lane divided boulevard. We will continue with this pattern all the way across the peninsula until we've reached the opposite shore. Building with our context in mind, we will now start a new grid that follows the direction of the shoreline. The grid on this peninsula developed in the 1850s, around the same time as San Francisco, Seattle, and Vancouver. Early waterfront development, which followed the shoreline, heavily influenced the placement of the first major avenues, leading to a grid that angled in different directions. This is the fun of approaching our city design with context in mind. Our design is guided by the environmental context, specifically the direction of the coast. But historic context is also essential, as the other major cities in the Northwest that developed contemporaneously also have grids that go in multiple directions. Let's now connect the cargo harbor to the rail line. While these modern-day harbor and rail depots are more recent additions, both shipping and rail were essential to Porter's early development. A logging community grew as settlers built sawmills, and the first port was built to ship lumber. The Pacific Railway arrived, bringing explorers who used Porter as a shipping point for Yukon and Alaska during the gold rush. Our data indicates that the wind direction here is ideal for placing industrial buildings along the edge of the coast. The development of the modern-day port began in 1912, following a city vote and planning efforts by the City Commission. During this time, the population was booming, as was industrial growth. This was well before the city prioritized environmental preservation, technology, and education as its values. While the city is trying to clean up its coast, we should not be surprised to find some industrial buildings still here. The direction of our grid has changed a third time, but it is maintaining the same pattern of streets and avenues. Cutting through the middle of it all is the 6-lane boulevard, which serves as a central axis. Let's extend our rail lines before we build any more grid. Unfortunately, the historic train station from 1910 fell into significant disrepair, but it was replaced with this modern beauty in the 1970s, around the same time the city began to reprioritize its needs. We'll bring the train tracks around this difficult bend in the river and up to the station. Now, we just need to find the route out and away to the other side of the map. We should also find a way to connect the downtown older grid across the tracks to the newer, wider grid. Here too, the rail has undergone a redevelopment, being placed below street level into a rail trench. The downtown grid will now change direction for a fourth time, marking the next turn of the coastline and mirroring the direction of the rail. Taking our train lines through this complicated grid requires careful planning and placement. Some parts will need to be covered with tunnels, but for now, it will be sufficient just to get it into place. Notice the pattern in our avenues. On the shorter side, we have a wide avenue every 3 blocks. For the longer ones, we have an avenue every 2 blocks. As we manage the changing direction of the grid, we are keeping these avenues consistent, ensuring there are solid connectors to manage our city traffic. Much like Vancouver, this city does not have a downtown highway, so we will depend heavily on the avenues and public transit. Let's now connect this downtown port by creating a one-way loop in and out so that traffic won't have to cross, which will help prevent slowdowns. The port is strategically placed to provide goods to our high-density area. In addition to cargo, we need a passenger harbor. Porter's first major passenger pier was created in the 1920s, but a new modern cruise terminal was added in the 1980s, making Porter a central embarkation point for cruises headed to Alaska. Here, we are using the 4-lane Avenue Quay to create the side of our cruise terminal. The passenger cruise terminal fits perfectly against the road. We'll upgrade the terminal with a second pier so that multiple ships can dock at the same time. This pier almost completes the major infrastructure for our downtown. We need just one final connection. We will add a 4-lane highway bridge crossing the river right into downtown. The trick is to keep it high enough so that we can build future improvements. This temporary elevated piece of road will help us set the required height. We also need to maintain room above potential sailboats and yachts. In the 1970s, Porter's mayor agreed not to build a downtown freeway after significant public protests. A compromise was reached, and the city council agreed with the mayor to build this bridge as a downtown connector. This is one of the challenges when playing the game, or managing real-life cities. City growth often demands improvements to infrastructure, but the consequences of removing existing neighborhoods can be devastating to communities. Even this one small project required demolishing some of the historic downtown blocks to make way for on and off ramps. Hopefully, the investment and demolition were worth it. We will need to assess traffic on the bridge and at these key intersections as we fill in the downtown neighborhood. Right now, it's easy to imagine that vehicles will get backed up as this will become a significant entry and exit point for the city center. Whether we escape crushing traffic will depend on our long-distance transit routes, as well as any public transportation system. Let's make the final rail connections, bringing out the tracks from the train depot, which are required for all train routes. The tracks can then loop around our existing suburban neighborhoods. Trains can travel long distances at incredible speeds, so they typically work well when the stations are spread apart. We'll place one small station by the suburban town center, which will provide an important point for commuters heading to downtown. Now, we just need to create our 2 train routes, both of which will arrive at the central train terminus. The first route will go from the central station out to the suburbs and finally off to the edge of the map. To help situate our city of Porter, let's rename this connection to Vancouver, making it an important Canadian destination. Our second route will traverse from the station directly to the other external connection. We will rename this to Seattle. While your cities can be filled with imagination, I often like to place them both geographically and historically. Let's create our cargo rail line going from the downtown port to Vancouver. Now, our cargo and passenger harbors need their own connections. This bit of land will need to be cleared to make way for our new sea routes. We'll also need to purchase some map tiles, so we can extend the C route all the way to the edge of the map. This route will take us up to Juneau in Alaska, an important destination for ocean cruises. The second C route will take us to Victoria, British Columbia, the real city on which this map is based. Although I'm using real names, I am not too specific about the correct direction from the city. Let's call this existing C route San Francisco, as it would be a likely shipping route from Porter. While we're at it, let's go ahead and name this external connection to Portland. All of our routes have been created, so we can activate the depots and stations to get our trains and ships moving. Let's take note of our transport data for comparison later. Our downtown port, grid, and highway bridge are already being used, and we've mapped out our new central business district. We have one more advanced transport tool to build before we start zoning. Let's build an elevated metro system. I found the elevated metro to be the hardest mass transit system in the game. Like all the others, we will need to place a depot from which metro trains can spawn. I prefer to use the 4 or 6 lane divided avenue to build the elevated lines. Placing down our first station, we can see that it fits perfectly on the divided avenue, with stair and elevator access in the median. One reason elevated rail is so tricky is that the metro tracks need to be perfectly centered on the road. If the pillars are off-center, you risk destroying nearby buildings or even building tracks that become unmanageable. Let's add extra metro trains to the station, as we will likely need them all. A second challenge with elevated tracks occurs when trying to cross bridges. The red conflict lines show that tracks cannot be placed here. Let's try to make the bridge shorter by extending out the land and redrawing it. This time, we successfully build the tracks across the bridge, or so it seems. When trying to place the next station, we see new red conflict lines, and the tracks we just built cannot be deleted. Since we're playing without mods, we need to revert to our last save. We'll repeat the process again, extending the land and shortening the bridge. Let's start by building the new metro station first. We see a third challenge here when the tracks unintentionally straddle the sidewalk. We'll rebuild the tracks, making sure they are perfectly centered. This time, everything lines up and we are able to cross our tracks over the bridge and the highway. To avoid some of these issues, I prefer to build straight sections of track first, and then go back to add the curved pieces. We also have several more bridges over our rail trench, and the metro tracks don't want to cross them. For this section, let's try something different. We will fill in the terrain and then create 2 tunnel sections to bring the train tracks under the avenue. Lowering the tracks to minus 12.5 meters will create the tunnel. Gradually raising the tracks to ground level will create the entrances and connect the pieces. Sloping the terrain will create a nice angle on the retaining walls. With a tunnel in place, our metro tracks can now cross the stretch of road. Let's continue to bring our metro tracks into downtown, bridging the old and new parts of our 2 grids. We'll start a second metro line out by Porter Institute of Technology. Placing elevated metro stations on uneven terrain is a 4th challenge, but thankfully one that is not insurmountable here. This set of metro tracks will continue down the avenue, around the curve, and into our next suburban center. Our stations will be about 900 to 1100 meters apart. The third metro line will begin near our small suburban train station in the midst of a town center. We should stay on the lookout for yellow conflict lines as we place our tracks. If the pillars are slightly off, we risk destroying existing buildings. At this crossing, we can build our second train tunnel using the same method we did before. Personally, I love seeing the trains as it brings the city to life, so when possible, I tried to avoid putting trains entirely underground. Several of our metro lines will come right to our central train station, creating a transport hub. Let's place the elevated metro stop right in front of the terminal, which has built-in bus stops. We've been placing the metro stops successfully, but a fourth challenge arises when we attempt to place a station on an avenue with too many intersections. We'll remove a road and then continue with our elevated tracks going underneath the highway bridge. In creating this 3-story stacked transit system, you can now see why we left the extra room. From one corner of our peninsula down to the opposite by our passenger terminal, we'll place our next station. Then we will build one right on top of our 6-lane boulevard. This boulevard is the central axis of our downtown, and we want our metro tracks to serve as a significant conduit for our commuters. We'll complete the lines on our peninsula by building stations along the lower avenue and connecting to the passenger harbor. This stop will be an essential gateway into the city for those arriving on cruise ships. Back across the river in Old Porter, we will extend a 4th metro line down the avenue. Given the limited means across the river, residents here will be able to easily travel downtown. The trick, however, will be to create an elevated metro bridge at a difficult junction where we already have highways, rail, and city streets. This last step will link Old Porter into the larger metro network. Looking at the transportation info view, we can see our 4 distinct lines, all feeding intelligently into the downtown. We can also identify the final gaps that need to be connected. There's one train tunnel left to build so that the metro tracks can be brought in. At some point, we will need to landscape around each of these tunnels, making them feel integrated into the city. Let's link up the open gaps we've left, making sure each station is properly connected and ensure that our routes will be able to flow. When metro tracks intersect, it creates a 5th challenge for playing a vanilla game. I also leave these intersections until the very end and save frequently in case I need to revert to a previous save. The tracks are complete, so let's build our 4 lines: red, orange, yellow, and blue. The red line will start in Chester Crossing, near the Metro Depot, make its way to Willow Junction and over the tricky highway bridge, come down to the train depot and cargo harbor, and end at the passenger cruise terminal. The orange line will start by the Porter Institute of Technology, curve around to the suburb of Highland Crest, cut all the way over to the 6-lane Central Boulevard, and end at the waterfront. The yellow line will start in Magnolia Terrace by our Suburban train station, cut over to the long park on the edge of Highland Crest, stop at the Central train station, the waterfront, and then loop around to the passenger cruise terminal. The blue line will start across the river in East Porter, follow the avenue down to Old Porter, head across the river where it will share a station with the red line, and then turn onto the same tracks as the yellow line, where it will end at the Central station. Together, these 4 metro lines create a robust public transit system upon which to expand Porter. When you add in the new tracks and stations, the region is more than ready to climb sky high. When playing vanilla Cities Skylines 2, it is easy for players to make a mistake while building a downtown. It might seem like you should just fill in your grid with the bucket tool and build the tallest buildings. Because we have strong demand, the block is going to maximize the size of your buildings. The typical rule of thumb in Cities Skylines 2 is that the bigger the building footprint, the taller it will be, whether zoning residential or office buildings. This approach creates 2 immediate problems. First, there is not much variety in buildings for each possible footprint. For example, although you get some color variation, there's just one 6x6 building for the North American high-density residential and 2 variations for 6x6 high-density office. The same is true if we zone 5x5, or even if we switch to the high-density European zone. The differences appear from colors or when the buildings level up. The second issue is the building setback, which is the distance required for a building to be set back from the road, property line, or nearby structures according to local laws. You can see these towers have a very small setback, meaning the distance between them is much smaller than you would normally see in real life. High-rises are not wall-to-wall buildings. To avoid these issues, I use 3 principles. First, provide an appropriate distance between each high-rise building. Second, aim for uniqueness where it makes sense. Third, design the shape of the skyline. Let's revert to our last save and go through these one by one. The key for all 3 is not to use the bucket tool to zone an entire block. Rather, I zone for each high-density building one at a time. We'll start with some of the taller office towers, placing them towards the middle of our downtown. We know that the 4x4, 4x6, and 3x5 base game office lots are quite tall. Let's do the same with the larger European high-density residential zone. We are employing the distance principle, not placing these buildings too close to each other. We are employing the distance principle, zoning only one version of each building. We are also thinking about the shape of the skyline, although that will take time to see. While we wait for these to build and for demand to stabilize, let's check the data. Roads, traffic, fire coverage, and healthcare all look good, but our downtown needs police coverage. Since we are building a city for the future, let's place the very modern-looking USA Southwest Police Headquarters. We'll add the helipad upgrade, which may impact the height of some buildings around it. Although fire coverage looks okay, we should add a downtown station and helipad. The data also tells us that our elementary school capacity is lacking, so let's add the modern-looking school from the Netherlands Region Pack. Citizens are flocking to our new downtown, and leisure is in demand, so let's place a plaza opposite the central train station. Our current focus is on this middle area in front of the train station. We'll continue to zone one building at a time, adding in the UK and Eastern European region packs. 8 buildings have been completed, 3 more are being constructed, and each one will be different because we are adhering to the uniqueness principle. Let's add a downtown, modern-looking high school, which will make the area more attractive to new residents. When zoning this way, sometimes you get the building you want right away. Other times, your attempt might spawn multiple buildings. When this happens, we can temporarily delete the side roads to help force the correct size we want. It's time to think about the shape of our skyline. Let's zone some small lots for short buildings close to the waterfront. Our goal is to create a skyline that rises towards the middle and then falls again on the other side. As we fill in the different buildings, we are not doing so randomly. We're placing large office buildings close to the train station, perhaps creating a financial district. Residential buildings are being placed all around, with tall ones towards the middle. The data tells us we need more leisure spaces, so let's utilize our parks to help demonstrate the distance principle. This office tower has almost no setback from the property line, so we shouldn't place another building here. Instead, it provides an ideal spot for a small pocket park or plaza. Basically, we will create our own setbacks, which increases leisure options and prevents our high-rises from being wall-to-wall buildings. Healthcare coverage is adequate, but it would be preferable to have a downtown hospital, possibly nearer to the waterfront. These short buildings at the end of the peninsula are starting to feel like a distinct district, in contrast to the financial center near the train station. The commercial data info view shows that commercial demand is high in our downtown. Let's zone a 6x6 North American high-density commercial building near our cruise port. Some medium-density mixed-use buildings from the Urban Promenades Pack bring additional jobs and shopping and fit in well. At last, we've reached milestone 15, Metropolis. Porter has really come a long way, but let's speed things up. We'll place the modern telecom building, which will boost our internet coverage. There are plenty of tall, unique high-rises to place in the financial center from both residential and office zones. In the USA Northeast Pack, there are 3 unique buildings with a 6x6 lot size, so we'll try to get all 3 near the train station. Growth is going well, but if we check the data, we'll see that our post office coverage is abysmal. Let's place the historic office from the Netherlands Pack as an iconic landmark, harkening back to the 1920s when Porter was becoming a major shipping and manufacturing port. Meanwhile, we need more leisure. Let's place more parks around our high-rises, creating setbacks to allow space between buildings. Tall buildings cast long shadows for people on the street. Adding setbacks helps reduce the canyon effect. Distance also prevents people from looking out their window directly into the room of the person in the next tower. With the central train station becoming a critical transit hub, let's place an observation tower as a tourist destination. In the late 1980s, Porter replaced its historic City Hall with this modern building, supporting their effort to transition from the industrial past to a tech-focused future. As part of the city renaissance in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, planners expanded the municipal part of downtown by building the modern Chinese City Library. Let's add more high-rise offices in our financial district. The Chinese Region Pack comes with 7 unique towers that share the 6x6 footprint. When playing vanilla Cities Skylines 2, it will be the luck of the draw as to which building spawns. In situations like this, I apply the uniqueness principle by removing the repeated buildings and attempting to spawn a different tower. Continuing with this approach, we'll try to spawn as many of the 7 variations as we can. I played a bit of whack-a-mole and was able to get almost all of them. The Chinese Pack has 3 variations for a 4x4 lot size, which are also worth adding to our center. We are satisfying our distance principle by keeping the tall buildings spread out. We are satisfying uniqueness by zoning 1 of each type. The shape of our skyline is starting to emerge, but needs some attention. The waterfront and land around the highway bridge stand in stark contrast to the density of the financial district. We will continue this theme as we work on the shape of our skyline. We will use our zoning strategy to build some of the shorter, high-density buildings, but we will also zone medium-density residential and mixed-use zones. Because all these shorter buildings are less prominent, we don't need to worry as much about distance and uniqueness. It will be okay if some of these buildings stand wall to wall and if they repeat. As we construct the waterfront district, it will be helpful for us to have a backstory. This area once consisted of warehouses, perhaps some sawmills and fish processing facilities. Some warehouses and older buildings were torn down for the bridge construction in the 1970s. Much of the area sat idle or was in poor condition until the early 2000s, when it became trendy to move in. Now, many buildings have been refurbished or replaced with modern glass structures. The renaissance of the waterfront is a common pattern you see in city centers. Just look at all the people moving in. When building a downtown with uniqueness and distance in mind, we need to remember that it will not be all high-density towers. If we did, that would leave for a relatively boring skyline shape. What makes this area around the highway bridge different is that it is mostly medium-density residential and mixed-use zones. We are creating an impression that some of these buildings are older by zoning the North American set and the USA Northeast Region Pack. Added to that are newer modern buildings from urban promenades in the USA Southwest Region Pack. It is mostly residential, but the mixed-use buildings provide commercial options as well. This is probably an area you would come to for the hot new restaurant on a Friday night. You can see how this all fits together with buildings, small leisure pathways, and parks. Essentially, we've created a tiny, distinct neighborhood located within our downtown. It feels like it has its own identity, but it also needs to feel integrated into the rest of the city. So many people have moved in, and we have much left to build. For today, the final part will be to organically connect the different parts of our downtown as we continue to shape the skyline. In our previous episode, we discussed intentionally leaving open spaces in our city, remembering that not every square needs to be filled in. In city centers, the same concept applies, although you probably have fewer open spaces. We've unlocked Milestone 16, Thriving Metropolis. By leaving distance between buildings and placing small parks, we are creating those open spaces. For example, at this spot where the highway bridge connects to the grid, we have created an open plaza that looks like a grand entrance into downtown. Strategic spacing makes each building stand out rather than leaving your city feeling empty. At this stage, we're using medium density and mixed-use zones to create low-profile buildings that complement our towers. The shorter buildings do not compete with them for attention. With this approach, we're not filling every square or treating high-rises like wall-to-wall structures. Instead, the shorter buildings create breathing room between tower tops, especially for our tallest structures. In other words, we're not just thinking about open space on the ground, but also between the heights of our towers. This spacing ensures each unique high-rise becomes a distinctive feature of our skyline. In Porter's financial district, we've placed our tallest buildings at the center, gradually transitioning to shorter towers and more medium-density zones as we move outwards. The result is a skyline that rises and tapers naturally from the middle, rather than dropping off abruptly. We followed the distance and uniqueness principles and focused on designing the shape of our skyline. In doing so, we've had an enormous amount of control to create an aesthetically pleasing city center, all while using the vanilla tools. We will not finish Porter or our city center in this episode, but we have seen how to create interesting and dense downtowns. Before we finish, we will use some of our remaining empty spaces for trees and parks. Since Porter is a city in the Pacific Northwest, we would expect to find lots of trees, like in Seattle or Vancouver. The trees help us stay true to our environmental context. They are also a reminder that Porter aspires to be an environmentally friendly and sustainable city. Adding more trees, parks, and paths also protects against the temptation to zone every square. Porter has had a long and rich history, from its industrial past to the technologically oriented present day. We built the city center thinking about these historic layers and the values that animate the current city planners. There is so much more we have not touched upon. If we checked the data, we could assess how our downtown streets are handling traffic and whether the elevated metro is working efficiently. We need to look at school capacity and unemployment. And we should explore how the new citizens in our exurbs are getting to work and how far they are commuting. We have parts of our city that still feel rough around the edges and disconnected, such as the industrial area and the Port of Porter. There is plenty of detailing to do, including using the in-game surface tool to create custom parks. The city of Porter is just so expansive that we cannot cover everything, but this has been a terrific step forward in our advanced gameplay. We started this episode with close to 70,000 citizens, and we've taken it to nearly 125,000. I'll make the save available on PDX Mods if you want to explore it on your own. And please leave a comment, give the video a like, and subscribe to stay up to date. Class dismissed.